Ja, god dag, kjære seere. Vi ønsker dere velkommen tilbake til oss, Frikanalen, Trond kvarter. Og spesielt i dag har vi velkomsthilsen til en velkjent, internasjonalt kjent jødisk rabbiner, Rabbi Weis. Og vi ser frem til en hyggelig og nyttig samtale med denne velkjente jødiske rabbiner, Rabbi Weis. We welcome you, Rabbi Weis. We are glad that you take part in our program. I think it is important. It will be interesting, I hope. And I should shortly say about Rabbi Weis himself. He's a prominent Jewish rabbi. He is an international, well-known international spokesman for the movement, the Torah Karta. So he's really well-known, respected Jewish rabbi, and we are happy and we highly appreciate that you are with us today, Rabbi Weis.
Thank you. First, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may convey His message. It's an honor and a privilege to be to be a guest of such a distinguished person in your program. It's really, we know you for many years. Your activities is known throughout the world. I mean, you've done so many good things. God should help you to be able to continue for long years and accomplishing what you're doing. And of course, we've worked together with the help of the Almighty on the issue of Palestine. Besides, like the medical assistance and the help with schools there and both throughout the world and in Oslo, it's just really it's astounding, your accomplishments. So, like I say, it's a very big privilege and honor to be on your show, and also because, of course, we hope with the help of the Almighty that it will the word will go out from here throughout the world that the world should understand that they are being misled in the whole concept of what this issue is of Palestine and what the conflict is in regard to, if there is at all a conflict between Jews and Muslims. And in truth, the root issue is that it's not a religious conflict, and it's not a conflict between Muslims and Jews. It's just unfortunate because of the Zionist their concerted effort that it has been presented to the world as a religious conflict. And we hope that with God's help, this program should be able to correct this terrible misnomer and shall bring peace to the world and sanctify God's name.
I agree with you fully, Rabbi Weis. We need more information, a better understanding about what is this conflict really about, this so-called Palestine-Israeli conflict, what actually is the ground for it, the background for it, and how to try to handle it and to try to look into the future. It is a great task, really, to try to handle this matter. Yes, please. Still in our mind, Rabbi, is Gaza. Israel bombed Gaza, killed, wounded hundreds of civilians in Gaza, and the bombs and the artillery had somehow Jewish symbols. The Israeli war machine were carrying Jewish symbols. Behind all of it, it is the Israeli flag with Jewish symbols. And you there, Rabbi Weis, eminent Jewish rabbi, what is your comment to this situation, please?
So again, pray that the Almighty should give the proper words. Well, first, that is part of the Nakba, this terrible tragedy that Zionism, in their whole being, in their whole existence, which is a real crime. It's a criminal existence. It's unacceptable. It's really flies in the face of Judaism. It's contradictory, and yet they insist on constantly going with the facade, masquerading in this religion, in this godliness that they are rebelling against. And it's very simple because it fits into their master plan. The Zionism really is a political issue. It's a purely material political movement. Yet, in order to be able to deflect any criticism, in order to be able to protect themselves against rightful uh, attacks against them, rightful condemnation of what they're doing, they clothe themselves in holiness, in religion supposedly, and they wave the star. They use the Star of David, and they wave the books of the Torah, and they claim that it's a Jewish state, that it's something to do with religion, and therefore what they're doing is protecting the downtrodden Jews who have been persecuted so long, and just relatively recently in the Second World War by Hitler, his name should be obliterated. So they come and they use this concept in order to intimidate and silence people from speaking up against them. And then it goes so far, like they say, the hubris, the audacity, the mere chutzpah, we would say, and the terrible that they would put on their missiles. They would even write Hebrew letters or something, and maybe even use verses of the Torah. It's just beyond, not beyond comprehension, beyond hubris, beyond crime. What they're doing, that the actual murder, the actual crimes they're doing, that they have to write on the missiles God's name. But in truth, this has nothing to do with religion. As we stated, and maybe later I'll just try to clarify very concisely, Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years that is to be subservient to God, to emulate God, to be compassionate, to do all the commandments of the Torah. God is the Almighty, all compassionate, and we have to, we've made a covenant with God on Mount Sinai to uphold all the laws of the Torah, which is quite open for anybody to read and to see, that we are to not to kill, not to steal, and so forth, and to do good deeds, and to show kindness, and to show gratitude for what good has been done to us, and so on and so forth. While Zionism is a movement that started a mere 150 years or whatever in that range of years ago, that's quite recently, and it's a transformation totally into nationalism, that they will have their own base, their own national home, a place on this material world where they'll call their home, their homeland, and they're going to build that homeland up with an army. They try to, that they should be from the greatest armies, the greatest accomplishments in every issue. So they'll try, they strive to have an Olympic team, that they should be gold medal winners, and in every aspect of what it means to be a material nation, that is what they strive for. But of course, that in doing so, it does, well, as I was saying, it doesn't really make sense. How can you do that when you're doing it in the land of others? So they use the religion of Judaism, this Judaism that's 3,000 years old, and they try to claim that they're simply progressing with this Judaism, and that Judaism requires for them to take back this land, and it requires for them to establish this homeland. Now, in truth, the Torah clearly tells us that since the destruction of the temples, one was King Solomon's temple, then another one a little later, which is 2,000 years ago, we were put under 3 oaths by God that we are forbidden as a Jewish nation to return as a nation, or in large numbers and mass, to the Holy Land. We are forbidden to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we reside, and we are not to make any attempt to end the exile, because we believe that 2,000 years ago, when we were driven from the land, this was simple, not because we were lacking power, lacking in strength. It was because, as a Jewish nation, we were commanded, when we took the Torah 3,000 years ago, God said that we should go up to the Holy Land. Anybody who wanted to throw away their worship, or their idol worshiping, they were able to remain there. And the Jews were to serve God on this very high level of holiness, And if not, we were warned. And God stipulates in the Torah, again, it's for anybody to read, says that if we will not be on that level, we will be banished from the land as a nation. And we were warned many times by Jeremiah, the prophet, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all of them. And it happened that 2,000 years ago, it culminated in the destruction of the temples, and Jews were sent into exile. And then we were put under these three oaths. God warned us through the prophets. King Solomon, when he built the temple, he actually he wrote this book, this prophecy called Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. We said these three oaths that we are not to return en masse once God sends us into exile. Again, the reason God sends us into exile because we were not up to par on this very high level of holiness that's required in being in the Holy Land. In other words,
I ask you, Rabbi, excuse
yes.
me for interrupting you, but 1 second back to Gaza. You know that Israel and the Zionists, and you talk about the Zionists, they say that they defend Judaism and they represent Judaism.
Right.
They are defending Judaism. But it seems you say that, on the contrary, they are offending Judaism.
Sir,
Is this a correct conclusion?
Directly, clearly, 100%. Because, and like I'm saying, in the Torah, the concept of simply creating the Jews, not only in Gaza, but stepping into the Holy Land and declaring that they're going to create a Jewish sovereignty, that is a direct rebellion against this. Now it's 2,000 years that we've been in exile, that God said that we are forbidden to reestablish any type of Jewish sovereignty. And of course, and it has no resemblance to Jewish sovereignty of holiness that was in the time of King Solomon and so forth. But any type of Jewish sovereignty is forbidden. And to return, it says clearly again the three oaths: not to return en masse, and not to rebel against nations, not to try to end exile, because it's a godly decree. And the reason God gave us this decree is that He said that we should be spread out through the nations for two reasons. One, that it should bring us to be humbled, and eventually we believe there will be a day when God will reveal His glory throughout the world, where all humanity will serve God in harmony. Then we will go up and God will build a temple where all humanity will serve the Almighty in harmony. The majority of the world won't be Jewish, but they will be all serving God, we believe, in harmony, and it will not be something forced upon them. Everybody will recognize one God. This is the Jewish belief. But the concept of going and returning, not through God, not through this peace that the God will establish in the world, His kingdom, this is expressly forbidden. So when the Zionists came along, and not only in Gaza, but again, when they came to establish this nationhood, all the rabbinical authorities around the world, almost in its entirety, I mean, they found a few rotten apples around the way, but the rabbis around the world, we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, from Lithuania to Poland from Hungary, or later the rabbis in the rabbis not only later, but the rabbis in Palestine, all stood up and said, we refuse to accept this concept of Zionism. Zionism is a rebellion against God. We are not to establish a Jewish state. And the ones who established this state and who made this whole concept of Zionism and the state of Israel, where, as you can see here, like this is the David Ben-Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence in 1948. So you see, sitting at the dais, who is that? You see that supposedly they're making a state of Israel, a Jewish state, and yet look at who's sitting there. You don't see one person covering their head. They're all almost entirely, they don't even believe in God, or not practicing Jews, certainly. And so, if you would make, let's say, a Muslim state, a Christian state, you would see priests. If it's Christian, if you would see a Muslim state, you'd see imams, sheikhs, ayatollahs, and this is what a farce this is. But the rabbis, as one, stood around the world, issued declarations, and I always like to give the Rabbi Yisrael Meir Cohen, who was the codifier of Jewish law in Lithuania, and he passed away in 1933. He lived from 1839 to 1933, and that was way before the state of Israel like over 10 years. And he said in one of his writings, he said, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. In other words, this group is going to cause the entire Jewish body to rot. So I mean, this is the way they looked at this concept of Zionism. Now, Zionism, unfortunately, was ratified by the United Nations in 1948. They went through all those years, and now when we're culminating, we're talking here about Gaza. So when they're going in and they're claiming to protect Jews in Gaza, then they're ignoring the fact that from its establishment until today, there's been Jews who stood up and have been fighting them and being brutally beaten. I carry always around, these are the pictures of this just this last month. This is well, that's actually end of June. This is the chief rabbi of Palestine. Now, when I speak about the chief rabbi in Jerusalem, this is of the Jewish community that refuses to recognize the Zionist state. So we have a rabbinate. The rabbinate has been there to represent the Jewish communities from before the state of Israel. It has nothing to do with this aberration, with this Zionism. But so we have a whole big community of hundreds of thousands of people. And then when the rabbis, as they went, succession of rabbis that passed on, here this is the last one, Rabbi Weis, when he took over. So you can see in the streets of Jerusalem, there's hundreds of thousands of people went to greet him. And this is in the streets right over there, where over 10,000 people, and just here in this area to greet the rabbi. And this is the picture of him. Now, he just went out. Just this last month, they went out to demonstrate against the Zionists, and they were brutally attacked. Here, what they're doing at this occasion, why they were attacked, is because the Zionists have no respect for the Torah or for God, although they traipse around and say they're a Jewish state. Yet they make autopsies. Besides what they're doing to the Palestinian people, driving them from the homes, killing them, maiming them, and oppressing them. But they have no respect for the Jewish community. So they beat them, arrest them, but they dig up graves for archaeological purposes. So now they're busy in, I think, Mount Hermon. They found old graves of 2,000 years ago. There was the rabbis from that time. And so they know the exact dates of these rabbis. So they're digging up these graves, and the Jewish people are there trying to protect it. So they're being brutally beaten and attacked, and nobody speaks about this. Nobody goes, and this is just something that's a continuation of the Zionist attacks that and like we always speak about the arrests of Jewish people. Every boy and girl who turns 17 becomes a criminal in Palestine, because they have mandatory military service. Our boys and girls, the religious, refuse to go to the army. So they get arrested. They put on them army uniforms forcefully behind the bars to psychologically demean them. Here you see a girl crying. She's carrying a prayer book, and she's behind bars because she refused to go in the army. You have children, young children, you see being brutally attacked and beaten because they're demonstrating against Zionism. We never carry arms, yet they brutally attack, arrest, and they murder. We have old rabbis who have been assassinated. This is ongoing. And as I was showing you the picture, they had no respect. Everybody knows who this great rabbi is, Rabbi Weis, and he went with a car of old rabbis of the judges of his court to go demonstrate, and they threw in shock bombs at them, and this is just an ongoing phenomenon. It's nothing new. But just one other comment I'd like to that. It's very important to state. It's that in 1948, when they established the United Nations was going to establish the state. So a year prior to that, they had sent a delegation from the United Nations to Palestine to see, how it would play out and things like that. But so the chief rabbi at that time was Rabbi Dushinsky. Rabbi Dushinsky was because it's a lifetime position, and he was the chief rabbi. Then he met with the delegation of the United Nations, and he declared, and it's the United Nations records, he said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. We don't accept any type of a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." This means because they didn't even, they didn't know that what's going to be, the terrible Nakba, the terrible tragedy that will be a continual since they established the state. But even if the United Nations would have had the power to give it to them, and it would have been successful. He said, we do not want a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. It's against our Torah. We're not allowed to establish a Jewish state, and even if it would not be in the homes of other people, it's forbidden to leave exile. And on top of that, we're not allowed to kill or steal or harm or oppress the people. And especially, mind you, the Palestinian people and the Muslim nations around, that they had been they provided a safe haven and a home for Jews when the Jews went through a lot of the history of the hundreds and hundreds of years. There was forced conversion. They tried to forcefully convert Jews. There was the Inquisition, where they burnt people at the stake if they refused to convert. It's very famous about the Marranos. Now, Jews were embraced in Muslim countries, in the Ottoman Empire and so forth. And Jews went to Palestine, which was under the Ottoman Empire, and they were able to flourish in all the Arab countries, in the Muslim countries, and in Palestine. And they lived together in the same courtyards and as brothers and sisters without any problem, even though there's a distinct difference in religion between Islam and Judaism. Yet this was never an impediment of our coexistence. So Jews lived together with a difference of religion, and there was no problem. We didn't have to have any United Nations or anything. The Zionists came along at the beginning of around the 1890s, or when that area, 1880s, 1890s, and they started to establish what they wanted, to create a homeland. And this created this mistrust and the hate and the rift and the terrible ensuing death and bloodshed, because they wanted to take over the land. And unfortunately, they used the Star of David, they used the name Israel, which means Jacob in the Torah. So people confused, understandably, we're not condoning the violence, but they understood that what's happening here is that Jews, because they call themselves a Jewish state and so forth, that they want to take over the land. And that brought to the terrible ongoing bloodshed. So Zionism, this political movement that was opposed by the Jewish communities in Palestine, they are the ones who caused this bloodshed, that caused the banishment of the Palestinian people from the homes, which was the largest segment that lived in Palestine. And then, of course, the secondary Arab community, which was the Christians, and the third community, the small community, which was the Jews. Again, they oppressed them, they beat them. We have ongoing demonstrations continually, and we could show you how many, tens of thousands of people are constantly demonstrating, and they're just being beaten, harassed, attacked, and assassinated.
Rabbi Weis, if you please allow me to return again to the land, the Holy Land.
Yes.
In our schools in Norway, children learn that this land actually belongs to the Jews. And this is a position which many follow it up and say, yes, this land is for the Jews. Yes, this land is for Israel. But we understand it is a much broader aspect related to this question. This is one thing. Is this land actually for the Jews, as we learn in school? This is one thing. Second, the state of Israel, which you oppose it. It is not a Jewish institution. It is a nationalistic institution, an aggressive institution, the state of Israel. But if we take your position, Rabbi Weis, and say that we oppose this state, it is not a Jewish state, it is not a just establishment, it is an aggressive element, and it is not an establishment which may lead us to peace and justice. If we say these matters, establish and follow up your position against the state of Israel, we are called anti-Semites. What is your comment to this? What we should answer them?
The reason why they are successful, of course, is because they are the movers and shakers of the mainstream media. So they enjoy the power of the microphone, and they tell people the narrative that they would like to present, totally ignoring the facts on the ground and what's happening there in Palestine. Like I said, anybody who would like to really look at the history, you would see the history of Jews living together in peace, you would see that the Jews did not aspire to take control of the land. On the contrary, all our rabbis, including in the 1920s, this is the rabbi who was in the 1920s, the chief rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Sonnenfeld of blessed memory, met with the king of Transjordan and gave over a statement stating that could clearly do not have any, we don't aspire, we do not want to take anything that is the Muslims that belong to the Muslims, that belong to the Arabs. We have no aspiration for that whatsoever. It's against our belief. So we have hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating constantly, and even in America, in front of the White House, we have literally tens of thousands going out there when this Netanyahu came to the White House. So this is something that's ongoing. So the Jewish people didn't accept what the Zionists say. The Jewish people that are living there are daily being beaten and arrested, which the large communities that were living prior to the Zionist state. So that the fact is on the ground, not as the teachings are in Norway, or unfortunately not only in Norway. I mean, we're talking about in Europe, in Europe or in the United States, and of course in Israel, that they keep on teaching them that it's our land and that the Palestinians are the villains and they're attacking the Zionists. Our narrative is that the Zionists have come with force and they are oppressing the indigenous Palestinian Jews and the Palestinian Arabs and Muslims who are living there, who were living there for all these hundreds of years. They have absolutely no right to do that. And the media is simply ignoring this. When we have these demonstrations, which we have many times, the large ones would be once or twice or 3 or 4 times a year, and then we have many, many small ones, which is tens of thousands of Jews in Manhattan, or weekly we have even less, we have smaller groups that go out and demonstrate constantly, because the Jewish community, the greatest enclave of Jews who are religious, live, let's say, in right across from Manhattan, in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and that's the largest concentration of religious Jews besides of in Jerusalem or Al-Quds. So you have that community, and there's not one Israeli flag in our communities. The same thing if you will go to London, to Stamford Hills, which is the very religious community, you won't find Israeli flags. The same thing is in Montreal, Canada, or wherever the very religious community they are. The more the religious, the more anti-Zionist, and they demonstrate. They speak up. And the news never broadcasts this. This is never shown. Press TV is the one that maybe had pictures of this, but the mainstream media just simply did not cover our demonstration. They do not cover. When there's a traffic jam because of our demonstrations in Manhattan, the mainstream media even refuses to address the reason for the traffic jam. They seem to skirt the issue. The reason is because either they are owned, some of the media is owned purely by Zionists, which they're very careful to own media outlets because they want to make sure they can control the news, or others who are intimidated because they have something called Newswatch or Camera, I think they have different news organizations that as soon as any media shows any sympathy for the Palestinian problem, for that they show sympathy or they address the fact that there's many Jews who are opposed to Zionism, they are immediately threatened by the Zionist organizations, and they accuse them of being anti-Semitic, and that they're going to lose their business. They're going to be boycotted because what they do is they contact the ones who do advertisements on their in these news outlets, and then they tell them you're going to be closed down. Now, anybody can see that this is the fact, because now, just recently, I mean, this is ongoing for a few years, but in the United States, there's, I think, over 30 states that issued statements, proclamations or something, that if you will, that they equate Judaism and Zionism. If you speak up against Zionism, then it is considered that you are anti-Semitic. And even our site, which we don't condone violence, none of our Jewish people carry guns. We never have. And that's why we have over 70 years since we're demonstrating, or more even in the Holy Land. And we're never accused of carrying guns. We don't carry arms. and we're brutally beaten and attacked, but we still don't carry out. Yet we write against Zionism because it's against God, it's against our teaching. They're using our name, and they closed our site down. They closed our what? Facebook and some of our YouTube sites. Even though what we did was we had sites that simply recorded the attack, the daily demonstrations that's going on in Al-Quds in Jerusalem, in Mea Sha'arim, in Beit Shemesh, in Bnei Brak, wherever we have demonstrations constantly, and we simply were recording the demonstrations, and we were writing what the reason for the demonstrations, because we are anti the occupation in Palestine and the existence of the state. Because of that, it's anti-Zionist. They closed it down, and they don't give us a chance to reopen it. They just sent us a letter that, according to their issues, we are considered anti-Semitic. And this goes in their style, what's happening in the governments, in the local states, governments, and so forth, and that's in Europe also, that you're considered an anti-Semite, and it's anti-Semitic to stand up against the state. Now that is so illogical. That is such a criminal opinion, because how dare they speak about us, who are the Jews who are living there? We Jews who suffered through the Holocaust. We died for our religion, and we're living there, our communities that are in Palestine, and we're trying to uphold our religion, and we're brutally beaten by the Zionists because we're simply standing and demonstrating, because we're pleading for the right to be a Jew, a practicing Jew in the Holy Land, and they beat us for that. We have no right to stand up and speak out what clearly is our religion, what it clearly states in our Torah. It's incomprehensible. If it would be done in any other land, if anybody would dig up graves like they're doing with impunity in their occupied land of what they call the state of Israel, if it would be done in Egypt, if it would be done in Norway, if it would be done in Iran, they would be vilified. They would have the prime minister of Israel would be jumping on a plane and be all over the world traipsing around and yelling that they have to send a restitution to Israel for the damages that they've done to a community, to a graveyard in Norway or whatever it may be. Why? Because they say, they feel they are the response. They say, of course, which is the audacity, and that they are responsible for the Jews around the world, and they're the ones who are digging up graves constantly for archaeological purposes, or because sometimes they simply wanted to make an extension, let's say, to Highway Kvush 6. The Kvush 6, that means Highway 6, they wanted to make an extension. They drove right through a graveyard. They bulldozed through a graveyard, old of antiquity. And our people stood there and demonstrated, were beaten, and we tried to stop them, arrested and beaten, bloodied, and some people eventually died from the attacks on them. And nothing. The world is silent, because they're looked at as they're the ones who will only do good for Jews. How could that be? How is it possible that something so illogical, so that goes against the simple basics of humanity, yet the world buys that? In Norway, is the same thing as that they have this problem that they teach in the schools that the state of Israel has the right to exist. It's a Jewish state, even though the records are there that we've like I've showed you the book of all the rabbinical authorities around the world. They all stand in one that they had no right to create the state. The community that was living there pleaded that they don't want the state. How could it be that we have no right to open our mouths? But that's the works of the Satan, and that is the fact on the ground now. But we hope, with God's help, through your program, through the intervention of people who are out to do what's truly what people call human rights, we call godliness, to speak up for the downtrodden Palestinians and to speak up what is righteous, that we will be able to change this ultimately and correct this terrible crime.
As for changing the situation and oppose this crime, and what about state in the Holy Land of Palestine? There are some proposals to share this land and to establish a so-called Jewish state on part of it, and the Palestinian state on the other part of it, the kind of two-state solution. May I ask you to comment on this, Rabbi Weis?
Well, when, as you see, thank God my beard is white, when they made the Oslo Accords, with God's help, we had our rabbis. Uh, we had a rabbi who was at the time from our community, of course, was the representative of our community in the Palestinian Authority when that was established. His name was Rabbi Hirsch of blessed memory. He had passed on already. And they actually, he was blinded in one eye. The Zionists, he lived in Jerusalem, and the Zionists poured acid in his face, and he was blind in one eye, barely able to see from the other. And he was a representative in the Palestinian Authority. President Arafat was very close with him and always spoke about the fact that he's not against Judaism, and which is in the Arab world, whether it's by the Sunnis or the Shiites in Iran or in Egypt or wherever it may be, everybody expresses that they're not against Jews or Judaism, they're against the occupation. That rabbi spoke up and against in that period of time, we've had constantly people who are speaking. So basically, by the Oslo Accords, this Rabbi Hirsch was invited by President Arafat, and he was there in Madrid, and he went there. Now, he stated, I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, and they had the final meetings. They had the meetings again in Washington, D.C., and we stood in front of those meetings with our signs, with our statements, and besides our rabbis that were inside, and we stated that although we celebrate the fact that Palestinian people will be given land and hopefully they'll be given land and so forth, but we can never, as Jews, accept even 1 centimeter of so-called sovereignty of the state of Israel, because that the Torah, God told us we are forbidden to have a Jewish state. We are forbidden to steal and take the homes from the Palestinians. We are forbidden. So this is no way will we ever accept the part that's given to the Israelis. Now we're not, and we said in the Torah, it says, God says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. It says, that's what it says in the Torah. So we said that even though it may look promising, the Oslo Accords at the time, even though it may look promising, but we are certain that in the long run, it can never be a successful state of Israel or a successful peace, because it's a rebellion against the state in any form, the state of Israel. So we stood in opposition at that time. And as we see, of course, it didn't bring to peace. The 2-state solution is not a solution. Firstly, we are, like I say, as a Jew, we cannot accept in any manner a Zionist state of Israel. Secondly, there are many, many Palestinian people who say they want to go back to their homes in Jerusalem, and they're forced, to give up their homes because of the power, because they took it over, and they have to make a compromise. Again, we're not going to go up with force. We don't carry arms and do anything like that. But we simply state constantly our solution, and the way is what is not our solution, but it's what God states in the Torah, that it should be totally, with God's help, speedily and peacefully dismantled. We can return. If anybody wants to use logic, Jews live together with the Arab communities in peace, as anybody can go back to history. It's not so long ago. We lived in the same streets and everything. We babysat each other's children. It's not a question of a difference of religion. The impediment to peace is that you took a political movement that's selfish, that's flawed, that's just criminal, and they're forcefully establishing themselves over the entire community of mostly Muslims, then Christian, Arabs, and Jews. So how do you expect that will be an acceptable solution? And how could you expect that these people, the people that are living there, and I'm talking also directly about the Jews also, we refuse to accept that they should be the masters over there. And if you're afraid of peace, why can't you simply look at the hundreds of years how Jews, without any protection of police, human rights groups, we lived in the same courtyards and helped to live together in peace. So the way to establish the true peace is to remove this relatively new, flawed political movement. That will bring the true peace, not fighting the hands of God, and supposedly with the 2-state solution, which people, you see that it wasn't successful after so many years. And again, people, many think tanks and so forth, they all say that two-state solution is a lost cause altogether, if you want to go just human logic. So it's not the real route to peace. The route to peace, as I say, is when the world will understand, will grasp the issue that they're being misled by a narrative of Zionism and what the history was, who's the victims and who's the villains. They're being misled by a narrative, of a vicious narrative of the Zionism, that the Jews and Arabs didn't get along, a vicious narrative that the Palestinians hate the Jews and they're trying to murder the Jews, when on the contrary, the Palestinians were always our friends, and that the just issue would be to return the rule to the Palestinian people, and we can once again live in peace.
I think the approach discussion about the final peace, the possibility really for really peace in Palestine, and you mentioned that there is no room for an Israeli state there. There has to be cooperation, mutual respect between Jews and Arabs and Muslims. That will imply a real peace in the area. But one question would then be how to reach there. If we start thinking about practical matters, how to reach to a kind of solution which will involve real peace in Palestine.
Well, with the help of the Almighty, the reason why it seems so unreachable, that it's just beyond reach for anybody, this type of peace, it's because the simple control of the narrative of the media, that that we have a religious conflict. Obviously, if you have a religious conflict, nobody's going to try to change Christianity. Nobody's going to try to change Islam. Nobody's going to try to change Judaism. So if these two things are going on a crash course, then you have this big problem. But it's all because of the way it has been presented. Nobody has taken the time. You won't find in the New York Times big articles, advertisements about the history of Jews and the Muslims, the history of how we live together, the history of what the rabbinical authorities throughout Europe, or even the present. Today, what is happening, the present, that you're having Jewish communities that are living, the very religious communities, with distinguished rabbis, distinguished communities. Instead of that, they're taking our communities and giving them the proper respect. They ridicule our communities as ultra-Orthodox, fanatical, and so forth. Although we have, our communities are made up of the people who are successful businessmen in every field and so forth, and nobody can refute that. We have people in our communities, B&H Photo. I mean, it's the most famous in Manhattan, maybe Photoshop, and that's owned by an anti-Zionist Jew from the follower of the Satmar Rabbi of blessed memory, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. So I mean, but they simply do not give any respect to this community, and they simply try to ridicule it as if it's some type of fringe group, instead of looking at it as the fact that it is the root and the basics of Judaism around the world. And when it comes to real religious issues, these are the communities that are addressed. So if they would look at the history, and it would be presented properly, and what the Jews today, the rabbinical authorities, feel, then they would see that there is a very, very simple solution of being, with God's help, of sitting down and coming to peace. Again, because it's in the hands of the media, it's in the hands of the politicians. It's a fact. I mean, we don't have to, everybody, it's a world issue that if you have a leader of a state, the leader of a country, and they're very vicious, very cruel, you can have like a Hitler did what he did in his time, make turmoil around the world. You can have that, in any country and things like that, and the whole country will change its policies and so forth. The fact of the ground is that everybody bought into Zionism. If the world decides that Zionism is an impediment to their world peace, that the repercussions of what's being done in Palestine is that there is hate around the world, when they start that it's not in their interest of Europe and England and the United States to back and support this they'll find the proper solution. Because, as I said, President Arafat, Ismail Haniyeh, who we went to Gaza, and we had also the honor, as you know, through the people of Norway and through you, we were so thankful that we were able to help to bring that, to contribute to that, to bring an ambulance and so forth in humanitarian aid. But we were constantly standing together with these leaders in Egypt, whether it was the imams and the sheikhs over there, the heads of or the ayatollahs in Ayatollah Khomeini and today Ayatollah Khamenei, they all clearly stated they have nothing against Judaism, and they have Jewish communities that flourish, and they in now till today in Iran. They have synagogues that have the names of the Jewish synagogues out there for everybody to see, and nobody attacks it, and so forth. And so these leaders are not out to oppress Jews. They want to live in peace with Jews, and the Jews want to live in peace with the Palestinian people. So if it would come, the leaders of the world that would insist that this ongoing cruelty of the existence of the state of Israel has to stop, and it should be a land that belongs to its inhabitants of freedom. It can be established, and it would be established. It's simply in the hands of the leaders. I mean, it's in God's hands to allow this to happen, but it's not as unattainable as one would think. It's a simple propaganda issue of the Zionists.
Rabbi Weis, we are talking on the road, what kind of road to reach to peace in Palestine, how to work. But for sure, I think, Rabbi Weis, that you and your efforts and the efforts of your movement, Natura Carta, you are showing us and helping us and promoting this way towards peace. So we thank you. We thank you for your work. We thank you for your efforts for peace in Palestine, justice in Palestine. We thank you for coming to be our guest in our program. We will come back on a later occasion. So again, Rabbi Weis, we highly have appreciated your comments and words in this program. We thank you. Welcome back to us again, Rabbi Weis.
It's an honor, a privilege. I left a deep impression when we went to Norway. Thank God, a few times. And we would love to come again. We love to meet the people. It's such lovely people over there. And we know that everybody really wants to do well. We just have to pray to God that He should put in the hearts and minds of the leaders of this world that they should strive for what's righteous. And that would be, with God's help, a free Palestine. We hope that they should come, a free Palestine, and ultimately the day when all humanity will recognize the one God and we should serve Him in harmony. And again, I hope to see you soon again in your hometown in Oslo, in your home city.
Ja, kjære seere, vi håper dere har hatt nytte av å følge oss i dette programmet. Vi sier igjen takk til Rabbi Weis, antisionistisk jøde mot staten Israel, en som viderefører genuin jødedom, spør du oss, mot urettferdigheten representert ved sionisme og staten Israel. Vi inviterer ham gjerne tilbake til oss. Han ønsket gjerne å komme til Norge. Han har vært her før, vår gjest. Vi inviterer ham gjerne tilbake igjen til Norge også, til å møte oss, og ikke minst også til å møte dere som følger oss her i Frikanalen, Trond Alis kvarter. Takk for dere fulgte oss denne gangen.